Why do the boldest scientific ideas often struggle to get funding? That is the heart of the science funding paradox, a frustrating reality where groundbreaking high-risk research is often the least likely to receive financial support. Most funding agencies prioritize projects that promise safe, incremental progress with predictable outcomes, essentially science that is already halfway proven. But revolutionary ideas by nature carry uncertainty and often lack preliminary data, making them seem risky on grant applications. Ironically, the very traits that make an idea potentially transformative, novelty, ambition, and unpredictability, are the same reasons it gets rejected. So, why does the system work this way? Because funding panels and institutions are often under pressure to show return on investment, they favor proposals that can deliver measurable results within short time frames. Groundbreaking work may take years to mature or fail entirely. Example, when Barbara McClintock proposed jumping genes, her work was dismissed for decades before it won a Nobel Prize. Analogy, it is like a record label rejecting the Beatles because their sound is too different. The science funding paradox highlights a structural flaw in how we support innovation. We say we want visionary science, but we mostly fund what's familiar, potentially missing the next great leap. How can the most daring, paradigm-shifting research proposals, the ones with the potential to redefine entire fields, be the hardest for scientists to finance? Funding agencies and grant panels typically demand extensive preliminary data, detailed risk assessments, and clear deliverables, yet by their very nature, transformative ideas lack those guarantees and often fly in the face of established methodologies, making them appear too speculative to justify investment. So far, so good, until we recognize that peer review, the cornerstone of grant allocation, inherently favors the familiar over the frontier. Reviewers evaluate proposals against existing standards and successful precedents, applying the metrics and assumptions they know best. Proposals that challenge foundational assumptions or propose entirely new approaches struggle to demonstrate feasibility within those conventional frameworks, leaving truly novel ideas trapped in a cycle of rejection. At its core, the paradox stems from two competing imperatives: stewardship and innovation. Agencies must steward limited resources responsibly, prioritizing projects with predictable outcomes and measurable milestones. Yet genuine breakthroughs demand risk. Experiments that might fail spectacularly, but if they succeed, open vast new horizons. The more a proposal stretches beyond established boundaries, the harder it is to reconcile with the accountability structures built around grant funding. Yet even this mechanistic view obscures deeper layers. The requirement for pilot data creates a catch-22. Without funding, researchers cannot generate the very proof needed to secure funding. Early career scientists, lacking extensive track records, find these demands especially prohibitive, while established labs can recycle safe extensions of past work. Consequently, funding flows preferentially to incremental advances, reinforcing the status quo and marginalizing the boldest thinkers. At even finer scales, institutional incentives and funding cycles exacerbate the problem. Short grant periods discourage projects whose payoff may emerge only after years or decades. Publication and citation metrics skew review toward trendy topics, sidelining long-shot investigations. Moreover, review panels, often composed of experts steeped in prevailing paradigms, may unconsciously penalize ideas that threaten their own research domains, embedding conservatism into every level of the process. In essence, the science funding paradox underscores a systemic tension. The very mechanisms designed to ensure responsible use of funds can stifle the radical creativity that drives scientific revolutions. Addressing this requires dedicated, high-risk funding streams, relaxed pilot data requirements for blue-sky proposals, and review cultures that celebrate potential as much as predictability, so that the next generation of breakthroughs can finally secure the support they deserve. Groundbreaking research often requires exploring unproven hypotheses without extensive preliminary data, making it inherently high risk. Funding agencies and review panels accountable for limited resources tend to favor proposals with predictable outcomes and established methodologies. This conservative bias systematically deprioritizes novel ideas, even though such ideas drive major scientific revolutions. As a result, the very projects capable of producing transformative breakthroughs remain chronically underfunded. Early proposals for CRISPR gene editing faced skepticism and funding hurdles before proof-of-concept studies validated the technology. It is like refusing to invest in the first steam engine prototype because it lacks the track record of established horse-drawn carriages. Incremental research grants typically require clear aims, detailed methodologies, and preliminary results that demonstrate feasibility. Transformative research proposals, by contrast, must articulate potentially paradigm-shifting outcomes without the luxury of robust pilot data. The mismatch between required proof of feasibility and the novelty of the idea creates a catch-22. You can't fund without data, but you can't get data without funding. Consequently, funding criteria inherently privilege safe extensions of current knowledge over bold innovations. Marginal improvements in cancer drug delivery are funded more readily than speculative, unexplored nanoparticle platforms lacking animal model data. It is like only backing movies with proven directors, thereby denying the chance for first-time filmmakers to make award-winning films. Individual reviewers, often experts invested in existing paradigms, unconsciously favor proposals that align with their own work and worldview. Cognitive biases, such as confirmation bias and status quo bias, lead reviewers to interpret novel approaches as less plausible. This microscopic human element compounds conservatism at the program level, reinforcing the funding of incremental over radical research. Even peer review systems designed for fairness cannot fully eliminate these subjective tendencies. A panelist trained in classical epidemiology may unduly penalize a proposal, leveraging unconventional network analysis for disease spread. It is like a club that only admits members who share its established traditions, excluding outsiders with fresh perspectives. Institutions rely on grant overheads and publication counts to sustain operations, creating incentives for faculty to pursue fundable, low-risk projects. Short funding cycles and frequent renewal demands pressure researchers to deliver publishable results quickly, rather than investing in long-term, high-payoff studies. This environment discourages the sustained effort and patience required for genuinely innovative work. Thus, systemic structures favor reliability over discovery, perpetuating a cycle where breakthrough ideas struggle to secure initial support. Tenor-track scientists may avoid bold multi-year projects in favor of incremental studies that yield papers and patents before their review deadlines. It is akin to a bakery focusing on daily bestsellers rather than experimenting with a new artisan bread that takes weeks to perfect. Quantitative metrics, such as impact factors, citation counts, and H-indexes, drive funding decisions and academic promotions. Groundbreaking studies often take longer to produce and may initially attract fewer citations until the field catches up. These lagging indicators penalize early-stage innovators whose work lacks immediate visibility. Consequently, researchers optimize for short-term metric gains rather than risking effort on ideas whose impact will only become apparent over many years. A novel AI algorithm may be revolutionary but undercited for several years if the community has yet to build upon it. It is like rewarding a novelist solely on first-week sales, ignoring books that become classics through word of mouth over decades. Innovation often requires crossing nonlinear thresholds. Small investments can yield exponential advances once a critical insight is achieved. However, incremental funding creates bottlenecks, preventing projects from reaching the critical mass needed for that breakthrough. Without initial risk capital, potentially revolutionary lines of inquiry stagnate in an iterative loop of minor refinements. This nonlinear dynamic deepens the paradox by making significant progress contingent on improbable continuity of safe funding. The Human Genome Project required a large, sustained funding surge to complete sequencing. Piecemeal grants would never have achieved the same outcome. It is like trying to light a bonfire with only smoldering embers. You need one big spark to ignite the whole stack. Persistent underfunding of transformative research slows the discovery of cures, energy solutions, and technologies addressing global challenges. Societies lose out on decades of potential benefits because funding mechanisms undervalue long-term payoffs. The innovation pipeline risks stagnation when radical ideas cannot advance beyond conceptual stages. Addressing this paradox is therefore crucial for accelerating progress on existential issues. Fusion energy research has oscillated between periods of intense funding and neglect, delaying commercialization by decades. It is like deferring investment in flood defenses until after repeated disasters, locking in avoidable future costs. Efforts to create high-risk, high-reward grants face skepticism over accountability and reproducibility in unproven fields. Establishing review criteria that accommodate uncertainty without devolving into randomness poses a major design problem. Moreover, reallocating resources toward riskier portfolios requires political will and stakeholder buy-in. Overcoming deeply entrenched evaluation norms demands transparent success metrics for radical grants. It separates census information metrics for radical grants. It says programs like DARPA and the NIH's Pioneer Awards show promise but cover only a small fraction of overall research budgets. It is like introducing venture capital in a bank-domained economy. Cultural resistance and regulatory hurdles slow adoption. Creating dedicated streams for exploratory funding protected from conventional peer review could catalyze groundbreaking work. Blended models combining public seed grants with philanthropic challenge prizes may de-risk early stages. Incorporating adaptive review panels with rotating interdisciplinary members can reduce entrenched biases. Ultimately, a cultural shift valuing strategic risk alongside accountability is needed to resolve the science funding paradox. The X Prize model incentivizes diverse teams to tackle moonshot problems with milestone rewards rather than traditional grants. It is like establishing a skunk works within every research institution, an autonomous zone where unconventional ideas receive freedom and support.